The funding for this program is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Friends of 4, 10, and 12.
In the words of Thomas Jefferson, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be. And yet today, some of our schools aren't doing the job they should.
Ronald Reagan before a national education conference last week. Tonight, the highlights of what the president said and how some are reacting to it. Good evening. Ronald Reagan did something predictable last week. He told a national forum on education in America that massive amounts of new money are not needed to cure the problems of the American classroom. Of course, that's something that Mr. Reagan has been saying for a good long time now. And predictably, that message angered some and at the same time pleased a great many others. The president's education speech last Thursday in Indianapolis, Indiana, was the latest event to highlight the increasing attention being given to changing American education, making it better, reforming it. The debate over that, of course, has already sharpened in Idaho and will sharpen more as the legislature moves to make funding and reform of education its top issue when it convenes in January. Tonight, we offer some highlights of the National Excellence in Education Forum held last week in Indianapolis. In addition to his claim there that education doesn't need great amounts of new money, Mr. Reagan did say that American education needs some basic reforms. He listed 6.
Of course, there are many fine schools and thousands of dedicated superintendents, principals, and teachers. But from 1963 to 1980, scholastic aptitude test scores showed a virtually unbroken decline. Science achievement scores of 17-year-olds have shown a steady fall. And most shocking, today more than 1/10 of our 17-year-olds are functionally illiterate. Now, some insist there's only one answer: more money. But that's been tried. Total expenditures in our nation's schools this year, according to the National Center for Education Statistics, will total $230 billion. Now, that's up almost 7% from last year, about double the rate of inflation, more than double the rate of inflation, and more than double what we spent on education just 10 years ago. So if money alone were the answer, the problem would have been shrinking, not growing. American schools don't need vast new sums of money as much as they need a few fundamental reforms. I believe there are 6 that can and will turn our schools around. First, we need to restore good old-fashioned discipline. In too many schools across the land, teachers can't teach because they lack the authority to make students take tests and hand in homework. Some don't even have the authority to quiet down their class. In some schools, teachers suffer verbal and physical abuse. I can't say it too forcefully. This must stop. We need to write stricter discipline codes, then support our teachers when they enforce those codes. Back at the turn of the century, one education handbook told teachers that in enforcing discipline, and I quote, "You have the law back of you, you have intelligent public sentiment back of you." We must make both those statements true once again. Second, we must end the drug and alcohol abuse that plagues hundreds of thousands of our children. Chemical abuse by young people not only damages the lives of individual users, it can create a drug culture at school. We need to teach our sons and daughters the dangers of drug and alcohol abuse, enforce the law, and rehabilitate the users. Whatever it takes, we must make certain that America's schools are temples of learning and not drug dens. Third, we must raise academic standards. Today, 35 states require only 1 year of math for a high school diploma. 36 require only 1 year of science. Many exchange students from foreign countries, Japan, West Germany, and others, are quick to point out that our academic standards are not as tough as theirs. They used to visit the Capitol in Sacramento every year, and I would have the exchange students in. And as governor, I had one question I would always ask them, and I would flinch a little because I knew the answer. I would ask them how our schools compared to theirs. And it would always be the same. There'd be kind of some sly exchanges of smiles, and then they'd begin to giggle, and then they would inform me how hard school was back where they came from and what a vacation this had been being here. Our sons and daughters need to do more work, to do better work, and to spend more time in school. Now, that's not a prescription for gloomy students. Instead, educators have found again and again that when students know their parents and teachers believe them capable of a great deal and expect them to perform accordingly, students gain self-confidence, enjoy their work, and live up to those high expectations. Fourth, we must encourage good teaching. Teachers should be paid and promoted on the basis of their competence and merit. Hard-earned tax dollars should encourage the best. They have no business rewarding mediocrity. Fifth, we must restore parents and state and local governments to their rightful place in the educational process. Decisions about discipline, curriculum, and academic standards, the factors that make a school good or bad, shouldn't be made by people in Washington. They should be made at the grassroots by parents, teachers, and administrators in their communities. And sixth and last, we must teach the basics. Too many of our students are allowed to abandon vocational and college prep courses for general ones. So when they graduate from high school, they're prepared for neither work nor higher education. And compared to other industrialized countries, we're slipping far behind in such basic areas as in the sciences and math. In Japan, specialized study in mathematics, biology, and physics starts in 6th grade. In the Soviet Union, students learn the basic concepts of algebra and geometry in elementary school. So Japan, with a population only about half the size of ours, graduates from college more engineers than we do, while the Soviet Union graduates from college almost 5 times more engineering specialists than we do. But it isn't just basic subjects that need to be taught, it's also basic values. I believe that unless we educate our children all that we are, the great devotions, the crucial writings, and the technical knowledge that have permitted millions to live in abundance and freedom, then all these successes are in jeopardy. If we fail to instruct our children in justice, religion, and liberty, we will be condemning them to a world without virtue. They'll live in a twilight of civilization where great truths were forgotten. In schools across the country, students are being taught the dangers of nuclear weapons and the burdens of national defense. Well, let's make certain they understand not only the price of defending America, but the price of failing to. As students from St. George's University School of Medicine learned in Grenada, freedom is not free. It can be easily lost, but is worth sticking up for. One other idea at the core of our basic values: I just have to believe that the loving God who has blessed this land should never have been expelled from America's classrooms.
During that same speech, the president said the major effort for changing education in America must come from the states, not from the federal government. And Mr. Reagan said many states are already moving.
Today, all 50 states have task forces on education. 44 are increasing graduation requirements, 42 are studying improvements in teacher certification, and 13 are establishing master teacher programs. State by state, success stories are mounting. In Mississippi last December, the legislature passed a bill to improve teachers' pay and, for the first time since the 50s, implement compulsory school attendance. In Iowa, where only 1,560 high school students took calculus last year, the state is putting together a program of incentives for students who take upper-level math and science courses. In Tennessee, Governor Lamar Alexander has proposed a Better Schools program that would beef up teaching in math and science and provide pay incentives for excellent teachers. In New Jersey, Governor Tom Kean has a proposal that deserves wide support. Under his plan, the New Jersey Board of Education would allow successful mathematicians, scientists, linguists, and journalists to pass a competency test in their subjects and then go into classrooms as paid teaching interns. If they performed well, they would be issued permanent teaching certificates at the end of a year. And right here in Indiana, under the superb leadership of Governor Robert Orr, you've initiated Project Prime Time, a basic skills program for early grades, and you've increased high school graduation requirements for the first time in half a century. The 50 states taking action to solve problems with efficiency and imagination. This is federalism in action. You, our nation's governors, legislators, school board members, school administrators, and teachers are meeting America's educational needs with common sense, vigor, and prudent use of taxpayers' dollars that Washington could never match.
Well, the president did receive, as you heard, a good deal of applause from the crowd of state legislators, school board members, teachers, and other education leaders. His remarks were generally attacked last week by leaders of the nation's two largest teacher unions, both saying the president was lacking in specifics while being long on rhetoric.
Now, we cannot afford to continue to say to teachers and to schools districts to do more with less. And we need to say we have problems, these are the solutions, and here are the programs and the funds to address those problems.
Was there anything that you agreed with what the president said?
Yes, I agree with the emphasis on improving discipline, addressing the drug problem in the schools, more parental involvement, and a stronger emphasis on the basics. I think we're in total agreement on those issues. But there were other issues where we disagree. I disagree on the tuition tax credits and the educational voucher issue. I also disagree with the whole concept of merit pay.
Every time the president speaks, he's got such a marvelous pulpit. One hopes for a little more substance in terms of solving the education problem. And what we got was more rhetoric.
What did you want him to say?
We wanted him to come forth with some specific federal commitment to helping us deal with some of the problems we're dealing with. For example, it's absolutely necessary to upgrade curriculum. We both agree on that. That requires workshops, summer school time, an investment in new materials, all of which most school districts can no longer afford. For example, we always hoped for some sort of return to programs that existed under the National Defense Education Act. For example, where teachers were given stipends and help during the summer to visit universities and spend 6 and 8 weeks upgrading their skills in specific areas. We hope for some presidential endorsement, the idea of giving students scholarships if they would agree to teach the public schools for a certain number of years.
All in all, then, it was a disappointing time for you.
Yes, the only new thing I heard was something about student academic fitness awards, which is just going to be pure PR, I think, and really have nothing to do with solving the problems we're dealing with.
Education Secretary Terrell Bell also addressed that forum, emphasizing many of the same points Mr. Reagan did. But the Secretary did hit particularly hard on the role played by governors and state legislators in improving education in this country. And the Secretary called particularly on the leaders of teacher organizations to support efforts to change the way teachers are paid along the lines of what he calls a career ladder. Just such a program was proposed just last week in Idaho by a legislative committee.
We need some reform and some change in our profession. In order to do this, the teachers' organizations on the local, state, and national levels need to join us as we take action to change teacher education, teacher certification, promotion, and salary practices. Teachers must support the widely supported view that we should supplement the traditional salary schedule with a career ladder system, patterned after, I believe, the academic rank system that's been in place in higher education. Landmark legislation, incidentally, enacted in California and Florida, as well as that now being drafted in a number of other states, need the support of our teacher organizations. I'm encouraged by the response that we've had from many teachers and many teacher leaders. Some reluctance to embrace these changes is understandable. But if teachers will become involved, if they'll help to shape and to move and bring about the changes that have to take place by giving us the benefit of their experience, I think they're going to be the ones to benefit. Many of you are saying to us, and to me as the symbolic Fed, well, we're getting all this rhetoric out of you. When are we going to have some of that great green federal money? How much more are we going to get in this regard? Now, my position is sort of in between the person that says don't give us any money. The worst thing you could do for the schools is try to give them federal help. I don't buy that. Nor do I feel that we'd ought to begin to levy taxes on the federal level, increase taxes, and begin to finance teachers' salaries and carry on many of the responsibilities that have traditionally been those on the state and local levels. Let me say, in case you don't stomp out of this room totally discouraged, that we do have already a couple initiatives, not very large ones, but I think very significant ones that we're going to be able to come forward with. And I don't want to go into any more detail than that because we, as I said, want to wait until our budget is out and our State of the Union message is out. But I've heard many complain since the National Commission report was released, and we've had these forums, that our commitment is rhetoric and little more than that. And I'd say to many of you that we haven't decided what our commitment is going to be yet, and so wait until you hear from us, wait till we deliberate, just as the state legislatures haven't decided what they're going to commit in the next go-around of legislation, and many of the governors haven't released their budgets yet and won't until January or February. That's when we'll be coming out with ours. I hope that you won't be disappointed. I'm going to do the best that I can to represent the needs of American education in my responsibility. Thank you very much.
As report after report on the state of American education has been completed over the course of the last few months, one word keeps appearing. That word is crisis. Is the American education system in a crisis situation? Many clearly think it is.
I think the word crisis would not be inappropriate in education. And the problem is that our standards and expectations are not keeping pace with what we need to be doing in order to maintain our economic competitiveness in a global economy, our national security in a restless world. We are not responding to some of the changes in our own environment. The large number of children who are now coming from single-parent homes are posing a new set of challenges to education, which if education does not respond in an appropriate way, if political leaders do not provide the resources and reform that are necessary to allow that change to take place, our nation will not be preparing the next generation of Americans for the role that it needs to play. One of the most concerning statements in the National Commission on Excellence report was that this is the first generation of Americans that has ever been graduated from our high schools less academically well prepared than the previous generation.
I think crisis is hard, but I think that most of us are sort of used today of living with crisis, and so I think that we have to learn to deal with it. I don't see education as much in an ivory tower anymore as it used to be, and I like to think of it kind of as it's in an ivory foxhole. We're sniped at from all sides. It's an honorable place to be, and you're sniped at. But it's not the place you want to spend your life, and your main effort is to get out. And I think that's what I see more than anything else right now as far as crisis goes.
I think crisis is a very appropriate word, and from my vantage point, with the data that we have, the comparisons with other industrialized nations, we have a crisis of the first magnitude. If the issue's not dealt with similar to the resources and intensity of gearing up for World War II or the space exploration, I think the country is in great danger of losing its competitiveness, particularly in the base industries that are so important to the survival of any economic structure like ours. So I have no quarrel at all with the word crisis. I don't think it can be emphasized strong enough.
Well, the problem is the crisis, I think, has passed, for the most part, the critical stage. It's sort of like when you have a fever and the fever has broken. Because the report is coming in at a time when we're really in the middle of the reform, because the reform started 3 to 5 years ago. And the reports have come in and the reports have highlighted the problems we're facing. But the reports did not address the fact that in most states, the states had already started addressing the problems that were in education, we're facing in education. So what the reports will do is provide more impetus to the problems or to what's going on, and hopefully get more people involved. But as far as the crisis, recognizing a crisis, we're halfway down the road.
To some it would appear to be harsh. For us it was in fact what we discovered and how we saw it, and we shared it using language they thought was appropriate to the message we were attempting to communicate.
The bottom line question in all of this is, who's going to pay for the school reform? And AFT's position is that it needs the leadership of the President of the United States. We have challenged him today to include what is it that he is going to do at the federal level in the State of the Union message next month and in his budget. And to remember that while we're moving forward with excellence, we do not forget equity, that we do not dismantle the programs that have worked, like Chapter 1, which is still not funded at the right level, that we do need to have the federal government involved in bilingual education. We do need to have the federal government involved in math and science initiatives. Those are the kind of things that should be done at the federal level. We haven't seen that yet. I think that was what was lacking from Secretary Bell's address. Frankly, it's what is lacking at this forum, and that is an action plan. Where is the money going to come from? We're not saying all of it should come from the federal or all of it should come from the states, but it needs to be a partnership. No one is identifying what is the cost of school reform going to be, and who should pay for it, and how should it be paid for.
Well, the federal role is already to pay 10% of the total bill. The federal role will do well to maintain that in terms of student scholarships, disadvantaged children programs, civil rights involvement. The point that I've tried to make in my address this morning is that with $195 billion of deficit, the federal government is committed essentially to Social Security, to the defense of the country, and paying the national debt. Now, there will be growth at the state and local levels, and there will be growth because our economy is growing generally. But teacher unions, and I understand their concern, are not going to find satisfaction in hopes for federal breakthroughs of new monies beyond the 10%, because such are not going to be forthcoming while deficits run at $200 billion a year.
We need federal help, no question about it. Federal government cannot just sit back and look. They've got to come in and help us. But we've got to be the controlling influence. We'll do it better at the state level. Education's always been our responsibility, and I think we can do it. We know local problems, we can solve them. We need federal help, but the responsibility has got to remain at the state level if it's going to be well done.
As a nation, we have allowed the compensation for our teachers to slip at the same time that teachers were moving from essentially a monopoly situation into a competitive world. 15 years ago, Sally, you probably would be teaching school because most women found their professional careers to be in education. Today, women have the full range of career opportunities. Schools have not adapted to that new reality and have not, particularly, have not been providing the kind of salaries that are necessary to attract quality people into education.
But I think we've got to realize that teaching, like any profession, where you have somebody who's really excellent, somebody who's doing it so well that they're making a lasting contribution, that they deserve more compensation, that you want to keep them in the profession. And there's another side to that, and that is where somebody's not pulling the load, where somebody is entering the classroom and teaching children and not able to teach children, in other words, not doing a good job, just shouldn't be a teacher, that means have got to be found to let them slide out of the profession, because it's unfair on the children, as we do now often, to just keep them year after year in the profession, even though they're really not skilled in the classroom.
State legislators are holding hearings about what's wrong with education. Well, they have to look at some of their laws of what's wrong with education. We're required to mandate to have health programs and so on, and those are all very important. But we're not required to have foreign languages, so those are the first things to be cut. We're not required to have remedial reading teachers, so we cut those. So I think state legislatures have to look at its own mandate and look for other resources other than school-based resources to solve many of the social problems that youngsters in this country face, from health education, mental health problems, primary health problems, those kinds of issues.
I think it starts in the home. I think it starts with parents who teach their children that education is the most important training, the most important experience that they will have in their lives. I think it starts with parents supporting the schools. I think it starts with parents saying to school boards and to legislators and to the federal government that we want you to work with us and work with the teachers and making sure that we give the best possible education to the children of this country, because the children are the future. And whether or not we invest today will determine what kind of country we will have in the year 2000 and henceforth.
Legislators in general, and myself specifically, have to look in a tug-of-war situation, if you will, at all the agencies, boards, and commissions within each state that want dollars out of the state coffers. And we have to make a determination on what we can afford to do. Education certainly should be at the top of the list, and I think we in the state legislatures throughout the United States are going to have to redirect our activity and attention to producing a better product, both at the teacher level and at the student level in the years to come.
Where do you think education is placed right now in state priorities? You said it should be at the top of the list.
I don't think education is placed in the top priority that it should be, and I think Commissioner Bell Secretary Bell has made the decision that the United States today ought to make a redirected focus on education, and I concur with that.
The school board members are really the primary means for change. They are the people closest to the local. They're the people that live in their communities. They are somewhat of a hands-on experience, so that they're the people that should be reflecting the views of the people around them and certainly should be demonstrating change. I live in a school district of 31,000 students, and we're growing in the southwest part of Florida. And we initiated change 3 years ago in increasing all of our graduation requirements. A school board that is concerned and recognizes that this is what needs to be done will not have to wait for a national leadership. They won't have to wait for the federal government. They won't have to wait even for their state legislature. They will be doing it.
That's our report for tonight. We'll be back here tomorrow with other news permitting, a look at the issue that the State Land Board will be discussing tomorrow, namely the pollution problems associated with some mines in central Idaho. We'll see you then. I'm Mark Johnson. Good night.
The funding for this program is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Friends of 4, 10, and 12.